Okay, we'll get going. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, wherever you're viewing from in the world today. We hope that you're well and you're healthy and hanging in there. My name's Gary Hodgson, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's fantastic special edition webinar in partnership with the Children's Coaching Collaborative. Before we get going, please let me take you through some basic family rules, as outlined just a little bit earlier. So be sure to keep your cameras and microphones off throughout this call. Please submit any questions that you have via the chat function available to you either on Zoom or live on YouTube if you're watching there. And please ensure that you're respectful to all involved today. I'm now delighted to be introducing you to the chair of today's session. She's the chair of the I Coach Kids Global Movement Committee, Sheila Quinn. Hi, Sheila.
Thank you very much, Gary, and good afternoon, everyone from Ireland. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. Today, we're going to explore a really important topic, which is respecting children's rights in sport, with two fantastic experts. But before you meet them, I have the pleasure of introducing Sean Kitson from Sport England, who will offer some insights into the work of the Coaching Children Collaborative. Sean is a development manager for coaching and professional workforce at Sport England, helping to realise the ambitious coaching plan for England and the professional workforce strategy. Sean has been coaching children for the last 15 years, and he's played and coached futsal at all levels of the game, from grassroots level to international. Sean, it's great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Gary. It's great to be here. I'm just going to share a couple of slides. 1 second. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, so thank you all. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes briefly introducing the Children's Coaching Collaborative and their Play Their Way movement ahead of our two expert speakers going into a little bit more detail. But the Children's Coaching Collaborative, we are a group of 16 organisations. Some of those organisations you might recognise on there, and very much looking to grow the tent. We are a number of youth coaches, physical education experts and national organisations that have come together over the last 2 years, and from the research of children and young people have developed a vision around children's coaching, regardless of age, ethnicity, race, disability, that all children should feel a sense of fun, freedom and belonging in their experiences, and that they build a genuine lifelong passion towards being active. So why have we established? Well, we know through our insight that more than 50% of children and young people do not enjoy their physical activity experience, and around half do not get enough physical activity and meet the recommended guidelines. That has decreased further as a result of the pandemic for particular audiences such as teenage girls, children with disabilities or children from low income families. But there is an exciting opportunity in the sense that in England there's 2.6 million coaches, and in a given year 80% of them engage with children and young people. We have an opportunity here through the Children's Coaching Collaborative where we're trying to kickstart a child-first coaching movement as we return to play, and coming back from the last 18 months, really shake up the ground from the ground up, inspiring many more coaches and organisations to come and join us if you have a similar passion or belief. And what does that philosophy, that movement look like? Well, I've already mentioned the vision, and just briefly touching on our truths, our fundamental beliefs that underpin Play Their Way, that situate themselves in the UN Convention, the Right to the Child. And now Debbie and Laura will go into this in far more detail than I can, but essentially we're talking about a child's right to play, to develop and be heard. Play Their Way, our purpose, therefore, is to put every child and young person at the centre of our coaching practice. And our promise, our commitment is to develop a child-first centred approach, to put play before performance, or indeed help us understand that play can power performance, to create community that includes and a sense of belonging around the child and the young person, that they feel free and safe to speak up and speak out. But it's also about dedicating ourselves to our own development as coaches and as the workforce to meet the needs of the child and the young person, that they can play their way. So over the next few months, we will be developing a platform for Play Their Way, a set of strong messages, guidance, educational tools to hopefully invite and bring in many other coaches and organisations to play their way and support this movement moving forward. So it's a pleasure to introduce you to this. We're really keen to get the feedback and thoughts from everyone regarding this particular movement, and I'll pass back to Sheila to share the next steps of the session. Thank you.
Sean, thank you so much. And from an iCoach Kids perspective, it's our absolute pleasure to be working collaboratively with you. Our aims and our objectives are so closely aligned that it makes sense that we would all work together. So thank you so much for the insights into the Coaching Children Collaborative. The format for today's webinar is very, very simple. Both of our expert presenters are going to present their work, followed by questions. You will have opportunities to ask questions via the chat function. So if at any point there's a question that springs to mind, just pop it into the chat function, and Gary will deal with that later on. So in order to introduce you to our two expert presenters, I'm going to hand you back to Gary. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sheila. So let me introduce our first speaker today. It's Debbie Sayers, and Debbie is the associate she's an associate in the business crime department at Peters & Peters and founder of Salisbury Rovers FC. Her PhD was in human rights law, and she's published at both national and European level. Debbie founded Salisbury Rovers FC in 2016 and AFC Salisbury in 2020, with Salisbury Rovers being an award-winning club with the Football Association here in England, and AFC Salisbury being an under-17 player-led club. Debbie coaches around 100 children and young people a week across age groups, where child-led practice attempts to embed the rights of children in sport. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you, Debbie. Over to you.
Many thanks, Gary, for that. And what a pleasure it is to be with you all on this extremely hot Tuesday lunchtime. Just getting my slides up there. So following on from what Sean's just introduced there in terms of the Children's Coaching Collaborative, I'm hoping to focus specifically on the truths which underpin what the collaborative's vision are. And if I set aside the term expert and replace it with children's voices, that's what I'm hoping to share with you today, because I would like this to be as practical as possible. And as we kind of whiz through some of the technical stuff about the CRC, the Children's Rights Convention, I'll move then on to looking at some examples from our club about how we try and embed practice within all our operations. So starting first, the Children's Coaching Collaborative really reflects and aligns with our model at Rovers. We put the child and young person at the heart of our model. The Salisbury Rovers was launched in 2016, and AFC Salisbury, its sister club, was launched in 2020. So AFC Salisbury is a kind of player-led pathway club into the adult game, and that was launched and is led by the young people involved in the team. And as I say, we're proud to be part of the Children's Coaching Collaborative because Play Their Way is exactly what we try to do. The other way we try to describe this is that we try and return, we're trying to return the game to the children who play it. And we ask all the time, what does football look like through the eyes of children and young people? And that means a reframing of the sport, really, away from what perhaps adults want out of the youth football game, to asking what children want and why they play, and trying to adapt our practices to fit in with those answers that we get. So these are our truths, and at the bottom of it all, children's rights underpin everything we do. So I'm going to briefly go through what children's rights are. Now, I can't do it justice. I can't do it justice in 15 minutes, but I certainly can't do it justice in a couple of minutes and a couple of slides. But in essence, it's important to know that children's rights are human rights, and human rights are the basic rights and freedoms that belong to everyone from birth to death. So these are rights that can't be given to us and they can't be taken away. They can sometimes be restricted, but it's not up to us to decide if people have them. They have them because they are human. And they are protected and respected by laws such as international treaties. And some countries have incorporated these treaties into their own national laws. There are lots of different international treaties which protect human rights, and there are specific rights which protect specific groups. And one such specific treaty is the Human Rights Treaty, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which looks to protect the rights of children. And this is considered to be a landmark treaty. I think it's the most ratified human rights treaty in history. The CRC protects all children to the age of 18. And when I say children, we're talking about young people as well. And it's important to note that it applies no matter how talented we think children are. So that's a really important point in the sporting context, because we often try to differentiate between, children who are just playing a game for fun, as we see it, and those we as adults feel are really talented and maybe require special treatment. So those rights belong to all the children. And the treaty has interconnected rights. So all the rights connect together to help children reach their own potential. The rights which underpin the coaching collaboratives model are the right to be heard, the right to develop, and the right to play. So I'm going to briefly look at those in turn. Laura is the expert here on Article 12, so I am going to go through this very briefly, but the right to be heard has been considered to be one of the most revolutionary, because it's taken how we see children away from them being beings in need of adult protection to them having rights in their own right, so that they have a right to participate in decision making which affects them. So it's a kind of revolutionary way of thinking about children. We know that children need safeguarding, we know that they need protecting, but actually they also have rights. They have rights to be involved, they have rights to express their view, and they have rights to express those views freely. And they have a right for their view to be given due weight according to their age and maturity. That's called, we tend to refer to this as their evolving capacities. And this right is really important, because I always say it's a measure of our human dignity to be involved in decisions which affect us. And that's kind of neatly summed up by the tagline, "Nothing about us without us," which is used in many contexts throughout human rights campaigns. But if we consider that if we're coaching in sport, are we really including children's views? We can ask the question, are we really abiding by that tagline, "Nothing about us without us"? And if we're making decisions for them all the time, then we're probably not seeking their views and acting upon them. I'm going to share some examples from Rovers practice, but I would caveat this with the fact that contexts are different, and people will find their own way to achieve different practices within their own club or sporting setting. So these are just kind of our truths and our practices, and I hope that they will maybe provide some suggestions to people about the things that you could do. So in terms of Article 12 and the right to be heard, we try to look at this in all of our operations, asking children, what do you want? What does the game mean to you? What do you enjoy? What is fun to you? And during COVID, we developed year group plans for all of the children, and we had Zoom calls, and we contacted them both during the lockdowns and after the lockdowns, asking, what do you want the game to look like when you return? And we drew up these plans. And as you can see, from a coaching perspective, they're pretty similar to the types of things we'd probably be offering children in those age groups anyway, if we were to disregard their views and just look to insert our own. So it's a good example of trusting children to know what's right for them in their own developmental stage. What's interesting about these plans as well is that they were drawn up by our under 16 players who did the graphics and everything for them, and helped children implement the plans in practice. I'm moving on to those under 16 players. Player ownership is really, really strong at the older age groups. Now, within our club, we place a high premium on play and free play, but that evolves as children get older and want more from the game. And even though these young people are involved in league matches and more technical practices, they've got really high standards of player ownership. So all of these graphics have not only been prepared by the young people themselves, they have actually been compiled. The content reflects what they want. So we've got their team standards completely drawn up by the players themselves. That's a classic example in the middle of a formation that they've set up for a match. They use an app. They discuss things on an Instagram group as to how their formation should look, obviously getting support from coaches as well, but this is really them leading the way. And the end graphic there on the right is them preparing an advert for recruiting more players and identifying the things that they want to see as they move into under 18 level sports psychology support, strength and conditioning coaching and things like that. So it's real player ownership in action. A short video here, nothing about us without us. We like to see coaching as a dialogue, and these players got together on the ball court, which they use a lot to play, and they did some videos because they were presenting at a conference, which actually didn't happen because of lockdown, but they did a lot of recording during the first lockdown, before the first lockdown about it. And this young man is going to explain how coaching happens.
Our coach, Debbie, she lets us pick what. She has a few ideas and lets us pick which one we want to do as a team. It kind of helps us because then we pick what we want and, you know, we just do it.
So we pick what we want and we just do it. So the idea is it's a co-creation. I might come up with ideas based on what they want as well, but we're trying to work it out together and we adapt as we go along. Coaching is a dialogue, it's a collaboration, and the kids have great ideas. So moving on to the second right, which is the Article 6 right to develop. This reflects the fact that children have a right to access opportunities to flourish. And this development includes their physical, emotional and social development. And we'll be very attuned to this as coaches. The right to develop is about realising human potential and identity. And again, sport is a really important way in which people can express their own identity and develop their potential. But it's important to note that development looks at the journey to adulthood, as well as the fact that we're looking to develop the child now. So in sport, we're often talking about the future player. How do we produce the future player? How do adults make sure we get players that are better? We've got to understand also that we're looking at the child now. So that little picture on the right, I love that picture. At Christmas, before the third lockdown, the children had loads of toys to play with at the Christmas session, and the little ones were just running around with like cuddly toys as well as playing football, which really reflects what we're talking about from the child's perspective. They're still playing with toys as well as playing what we see to be a sport in which they've got to learn technical rules. And Alfie Cohen sums this up really nicely. If children feel safe, they can take risks, ask questions, make mistakes, learn to trust, share their feelings and grow. So that is development in an essence, really. Can we create that environment in which all that can happen? And again, here's some examples from Rovers. These are teams from under 9 to under 16, planning and running their own matches.
When taking those kickings, I think we should, because we keep kicking it from like over there straight up. I think we should just do focus more like up, down the line.
Wait, who went off last time?
I was on the whole time.
Who lost?
You can pick me up.
You and Aaron, me and Kia, so Jen and Martin. Wait, were you off? Yeah, so Jen and Martin?
Off, yeah.
Yeah, and then
I was on the whole time.
anyone want to play anywhere?
I'll go up front.
You want to go up front? Kia, where do you want to play? I don't mind.
Left back.
Left
Just a few things from that, and I'll try and talk quickly. I'm conscious of time, but I love the fact that there's two boys at the back there who were given an impromptu goalkeeper session. So peer-to-peer learning in action. And we've also got the young man here who is leading the session, being quite capable of calling everybody back to attention when he needed to, and people engaging with that. So please have confidence that young people who are engaged in the sport will listen to each other. They're just, you know, it's not all chaos. But even from a younger age group, you can see that they, you know, I was recording all of this, nobody's paying any attention to me whatsoever because they are so used to acting in this way. So kids have great ideas, and it's part of their social development as well to be able to share them. And as part of that development at the club, we try very much to put person before player, and that's mentioned a lot in football. But what do we really mean, and do we really respect it in practice? Great quote from Messi here. I'm more worried about being a good person than being the best player in the world. When all this is over, what are you left with? Quite a lot of money, I would think, in Messi's case, but I think it's still important to notice what he's trying to say is that we prioritise the person, and with empowered, intelligent young people, we are likely to get empowered into intelligent sports people too. So these are examples from the club of our oldest players leading younger players. So they've developed some games for them there on the right. You can see them in action coaching there at the top. The slide at the bottom, they're all going to a football match together across the age groups, and we try to develop as much mixed play as possible and mixed engagements. And then on the left here, 2 of our players very recently got awarded Heroes of the Year by the local newspaper for not only their work within the club, but with the broader community and the projects that we do as well. So we put a high premium on that, that children have got a right to access development opportunities. And it's not just all about how good a pair of feet you are, it's about who you are as a person. And finally, the Article 6 on the right to play. This is something we are hugely passionate about the club. We are probably known, if known for anything, for our free play activities. Play is absolutely fundamental to the childhood experience. But I have to say straight away that it belongs to children. We shouldn't see it as a coaching tool. Quite often, we see things, there may be coaching workshops or programs that are run as how to use play in your sessions. If we're using play as adults, then it doesn't belong to the children. So play is when we step back and we let them lead. It's non-compulsory, it's directed by children themselves, and it's undertaken for its own sake and not as a means to an end. So it's not a tool that we use to be able to achieve an objective. And we can distinguish it from adult structured activities. One of the things I often am aware of is that people will say free play, for example, is it's unstructured and chaotic, whereas coaching activities are structured and focused. Actually, child's play can be hugely structured. If you are with children enough and you observe free play enough, children create a lot of structure to their games. So what we're talking about is the distinction between time which is controlled by adults and time which is not controlled by adults. And again, some examples from Rovers. This is a little clip, kind of routine practice from the club where we ask the children to develop their own game.
So Sebastian, what have you decided to do in your game?
If we score, it's basically double. So if we score 1, it's 2. If we score 2, it's 4. If we score 3, it's 6. Whoa. If we score 4, it's 8. If we score 5, it's 10. If we score 6, it's 12.
Whoa.
If we score 7, it's 14. If we score 8, it's 16. If we score 9, it's 18.
So not just football, but maths too. Yes. Whoa, you've got your work cut out. So guys, what do you think about that rule? And is that a rule you made up yourselves? Yeah. Loving it. Let's see how that one goes.
So high levels of engagement, high levels of fun, complete ownership of the game. They've done it themselves, and look how proud they are of doing that as well. So, you know, trust children, they can make up great games. So one of the things we do as well in play is to offer community projects. So for us, Play is for all and play should be free. We make sure that we are offering community projects in areas where children might not get a chance to play. And those projects are accessible to all for free. They're in the heart of their local communities as well. Example again of the ball court down a small estate in Salisbury, which is under the shadow of the grand cathedral and grammar school, but it's a very different world. And we make sure also that all the projects that we offer children's voices are saw, and we ask them what they want. We believe this is critical for empowering people, and that play empowers self-motivated players. Kids who play for themselves continue to play for themselves. So rights in coaching. I love this quote as well. The gardener cannot actually grow tomatoes, squash or beans. She can only foster an environment in which the plants do so. So we're about environment creation. Can we create the right environment in which children can learn to develop and express themselves? As coaches, we may be well attuned to this. We may be doing many of these things already. We often ask already what is meaningful to the person that we're coaching. We respect the person. We know that children are all different and that the development is non-linear. Can we move on from that to create a really effective rights respecting culture in which we can embed those rights within our organisations? In a nutshell, as Sean said, can we play their way? And finally, please trust children. Even if they're playing and their voices are being heard and you think you're losing control, they will develop. These boys in yellow are my under 16s playing a very excellent futsal club locally, which has an adult male team, and they play to a high standard. And my boys haven't had really a chance to practice or train because there aren't enough of them. But here they are in a match. The disparity between them should be massive, but I think you'll judge for yourself. And there is no sound on it, should that? So empowered thinking individuals lead to empowered thinking players. I'm sorry if I've gone over time there, but thank you very much.
Debbie, thank you so much for such an insightful presentation. I'm sure we've already had a few questions start to come through, and we'll ask them shortly. But for now, thank you, Debbie, and let me introduce our next presenter. So, Professor Laura Lundy is co-director of the Centre for Children's Rights and a professor in the School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work at Queen's University in Belfast. Her expertise is threefold: the children's right to participate in decision-making, the right to education, and the implementation of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child in Law and Policy. She's also an expert advisor on the child participation to Children's Right Connect, and has provided advice and/or training on children's rights to a wide range of other international organisations, including the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, the OSCE, the European Commission, UNICEF, and Save the Children. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Laura Lundy. Hi, Laura.
Hi, really pleasant to be with you. Just give me 1 second, I'll get my screen up and share. Sorry, excuse me. Things in the way. Thank you. Can you see that now? Yeah?
We certainly can.
Brilliant, thank you. It's really lovely to be with you. I was just enjoying listening to Debbie and the examples that she was given of this. This is really quite exciting for me because I do a lot of training and talking about child's right and participation, and in so many topics and so many issues of children's lives, but it's the very first time I've been asked to speak about it in the context of sports at all and coaching, which seems incredible. And I think that's why it's so important that this is happening, that you have this initiative. I was looking at these concepts of fun, freedom and belonging that Sean talked about. And of course, that completely fits with a general child rights and child rights respecting perspective. So I'm really, really pleased to be here. I'm going to focus today on the right to be heard, and I'm going to describe my understanding of what that is before raising some questions with you about how that might work in your context, which I think Debbie's already answered some, but we'll see how it goes. Debbie mentioned Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is one of the most innovative parts of the Convention. It's actually one of the most controversial, and I think we can't get away from that in any context, and I'm sure including sport, that there are some people that actually don't really accept that children should be telling adults what to do as it's seen, that actually in ways this is the one that causes resistance and controversy, because some people think adults know best and should be just adult expertise, should be telling children what to do, and then children should be doing it. But that's not what the law says. The law says that a child who's capable of forming a view has the right to express it freely, and that that view must be given due weight. Very few people I know can recite Article 12 verbatim. It's quite complex provision, quite convoluted. And what happens then is then it gets shortened, which I'm going to come to. Who does it apply to? And I think this is something I'd really like to get involved in the discussion today. It's a right of individuals, children, but it's also a right of groups of children. So how does that play out in sports and coaching? I'm curious, because clearly you have children making individual decisions about what they want to play, what they want to play, who they want to play with, when, how, and that needs respected. But then of course we have clubs, and we have societies, and we have teams. So at the team level, and I think Debbie's work showed that really clearly, you can see the children developing their own team, and they need to be heard in their own team. And then in your club, and then in your sport, and then at national policy level. This right applies all the way up from the individual child to the national policy level. Which decisions does it apply to? I like this quotation from the committee. The Committee on the Rights of the Child says that we should listen to children when their perspective will enhance the quality of solutions. And I think if you have it in the head, where will they help us out? And I think what Debbie was showing was they help us out everywhere. For every decision that was happening, those children had strategies, they had ideas, they were able to discuss them. And that's what we should, so where is sport feature in this? We think about sports, we think about coaching. Debbie already mentioned the Article 31, the right to play in the convention. It's more than the right to play, it's to engage in play and recreational activities appropriate to their age. It's rest, it's leisure, it's all of that. You know, it's quite a neglected provision. We call it the forgotten provision in the convention. And we think it's forgotten because it's not taken as seriously, like it's not important. But of course, what we know from all the research that is in fact that play, sport, leisure and rest is crucial as well, that this could in fact be the most important provision in the convention. And we also know that if children had been asked, children did not draft the convention that protects them, which is one of our concerns about it. If children had been asked to draft the convention, the rights of the child, and I've asked children what they would put into it, you would have a much stronger and bigger emphasis on play, sport and leisure. So where am I in this? Going back 17 years ago, I conducted a research study in Northern Ireland where we asked children about all aspects of their lives. And what came out of that for me was this big disconnect. I am a lawyer and I knew the legal text, which I showed you in my first slide. We were talking to adults in children's lives, including in sports and our sports council and their coaches and their PE teachers and others. And we were and their lawyers and social workers. And we were asking them about listening to the views of children. None of them had heard of Article 12, but they would say, "Oh, no, we'd say about involving children. Of course, we do that. We've got a big thing on the voice of the child. We have a big thing about capturing their voices. It's really important to us in professional discourse." But in the middle, what children then and children still tell us is that often their views are not sought at all. If their views are sought, they're not taken seriously. Or if they try to suggest their views, and this is a really significant thing, so they're not sought and they're not asked, but children try to say, "We don't want to do it this way, we'd rather do it this way, this is what we think," they quite often get dismissed and sometimes put down. They're considered to be challenging authority, challenging professionalism, and they're considered to be cheeky. And this is what this image tries to capture. It was drawn in the context of family life, not sports. But this is a mother saying, "You shouldn't be telling me what to do." And the child saying, "But I was just trying to tell you what I think." Now, as an adult, we would not expect to be put down. If we were trying to say what we thought about some decision that was being made for us, you wouldn't expect that response. But children expect that response, and because of that, sometimes they don't offer any opinion at all. So this got me thinking, this disconnect about this notion of these abbreviations, voice of the child, or the right to have a say, or the right to be heard. Now, we all use them. I have to use them because you can't quote all of Article 12. But I decided back then that I was really concerned about some of them because each of these abbreviations was potentially going to undermine implementation, which is one of my key areas of interest. They're imperfect and they can potentially undermine implementation. And I came up with a new academic model at the time, it was, where I said voice is not enough. It's not about voice, it's about space, creating the conditions. It is about voice, it's also about audience, who's listening, and it's about influence, what's happening. And it needs to be understood, as Debbie was saying, in the context of the broader convention, non-discrimination, best interest, being safe, which of course is crucial and has driven some of the rights agenda in sport. It has to be understood in that wider context. So those are the 4 concepts: space, voice, audience, and influence. And I'm going to take you through, I'm not going to read that out because there's no point, because I'm going to take you through each of them now. Space, it has to be assured to the child, which is a really strong legal obligation. So you don't wait till children and young people come and say to you, we would like to do this. You have to actively create, as Debbie showed, the conditions where their views are sought, and they're given space to form their views, and they're given space to express their views. It's active. It needs to be a safe space. This cannot be more crucial. It needs to be a space where children are not afraid of rebuke or reprisal. Okay, and I'm not talking about the coaches or the trainers as well. We understand from our own research that the peer reaction is often really important to them. So you need to create the conditions where all children aren't worried about saying something in case of someone else is going to put them down. You're trying to create that very respectful space, and it needs to be an inclusive space, which is great. I could see it in your charter. This is for all children, and that you have, the rights are for all children. So whether that child, has a disability, whether it's a girl or a boy, or ethnicity, or what language they speak, it's making sure that all children can be heard, and that might create, necessitate creating new ways to seek their views. So that brings me to voice. Crucially, this is a right and not a duty. So children don't have to be involved. If they don't want to be involved, don't make them, because it's a right, not a duty. They can decide whether they want to be involved, and sometimes that's about creating the right conditions, but it shouldn't ever be forced to give their views if they don't want to. What helps that is giving choice in the mode of expression. So some children will be really confident speaking out loud and sitting in the circle. Some children might be hanging back and want to whisper in the coach's ear. Some children might want to tell their friend, who might want to put set for them. It may be that you need to create areas where there are confidential surveys, little online things, but actually you need to give choice, because not all children will be confident, like not all adults will be confident in speaking in the same way, and for instance, in public. This is the one thing that's misunderstood about the convention. This right to be heard is capable of all children who are capable of forming a view. It is not restricted in any way by age or maturity. The weight given to the views is balanced with age and maturity. The right to be heard is not in any way. If a child is capable of forming a view, and they'll express it, and whether that could be non-orally, whether that's because they cry, whether that's because they scream, whether that's because they get angry, if they're showing what they're feeling about something, it's trying to read that language sometimes as opposed to them giving an articulate response. And they may actually need help to form a view. If you ask them, what position they want to play, they might know, they might not, and they might need help with that. If you ask them that you've set up your club and you're trying to decide what your priorities for your club are, or what fundraising you're going to do, they may need options. And as Debbie was saying, she doesn't go with nothing. She goes and says, here's some ways I'm thinking about, what do you think about? And that's helping children to form and express their own views, giving them some choices they can work through. Audience, this is the bit where I think the model became famous, because this was neglected. We have a lot of activity which collects children's views, and not a lot of understanding about where they go, what happens to them, and actually children themselves seeing that. So the audience concept, it's not just being heard, it's being actively listened to. And it's creating channels of communication. So if you're asking a child their views, they should know where their views are going, and they should know who's listening. They should know what that person's going to do. They should know if that person has the authority, power, influence, money, inclination to help them. And if they don't, they need to know where they can get their views to, so the right person hears them. So again, in your club, there will be people who have certain responsibilities and others that don't. And I think it's been really clear about who they are and who the children's views should go to. And finally, the Holy Grail, which is influence. So this is the point where you say that views are given due weight in accordance with age and maturity. Okay, so this potential has the potential to undermine the whole thing, where adults take views, listen to them, and go, well, actually, that wasn't really sensible. And again, this is really not what rights respecting is about, because of course, sometimes children, less often, as Debbie showed, than you think, do they say things that can't work or won't work. But it's not about putting them down. It's ensuring that you respond to that and you give them feedback about what was able to happen, what was not able to happen, why, if you couldn't do something that children wanted, why not? And is there another strategy? Is there another way around that? I said back in 2007, when I wrote the model, we need to create the conditions where we make it uncomfortable to solicit views and then ignore them. I know I haven't time for it today, but where my current work is on feedback. I think feedback is crucial. It needs to be fast, it needs to be full, it needs to be accessible to them, and it needs to be followed up, but that's a different talk. In practice, The model I wanted to be legally sound and user-friendly. The original diagram was not user-friendly in any way, but lots of people have taken it and adapted it and made it their own. And these are just some examples. There's a report by UNICEF on adolescence, which incorporates my model into some other participation models. And I can put a reference in the chat box that I really, really like it. Jerison Lansdowne, who's a child participation expert, did that with a whole bunch of other global child experts, and you can just see, you know, my model in the different types of participation and context. Last year we did work for BBC Children in Need around their funding programs and setting up children's strategic governance for their funding, so that when they were deciding where money goes, the children are able to influence that and influence the types of projects and set up charters and principles for that as well. So to finish, I want to show what I think is the strongest example of it globally, and that is in the south of Ireland and Ireland. I'm so pleased that, you know, Sheila was here, that Ireland back in 2015 did something really unusual, not so unusual now. They created a whole government national youth participation strategy. So every government department had to set down action points at every level, okay? And that was a really significant thing to happen. And at that time, I worked with the Irish government's then policy officers to create this checklist of the Lundy models. These were questions you can ask yourself, primarily for policymakers, but has been used by an awful lot of people all over the world since. You know, have children's views been sought? Is there a safe space? How can you assure everybody? Very simple questions with yes or no answers. And that checklist has a life of its own. It's used by the World Health Organization now. But what was really brilliant about the strategy is, of course, it's no point in having a strategy unless you've got action points and you've got specific targets. So they have across that strategy specific departments. You can see here Sport Ireland with Sheila here, and so I was really delighted earlier to see that what this is working, is that each of these publicly funded bodies would create an action point for itself, and then it was going to follow up how it was going to engage children and young people. And there are lots and lots of what has happened since then is organisations like Swim Ireland or the GAA, or in this case, their detention centre for young people in conflict with the law, or their child protection agency, have all got their own strategies based on the Lundy model, where they're engaging with all sorts of children and young people. So it has cascaded brilliantly because there was commitment to it. And I'm going to finish now with where we're at now, because this has been a really exciting development for us this year. In the last year, I have worked with Hubnanog, who are commissioned by the Irish government to do their child participation services. And we have developed a whole national framework of child participation. And what's so much better about this one is that we were not consulting with just policymakers. Hubnanog consulted with sports organisations, with paediatricians, with teachers, with early childhood, with social workers, to develop a series of tools that are practical. This is one of them. This is a checklist if you were going to involve children and young people in your policy making, whether that is at your, you know, the club level again, or national level or regional level. You can ask yourselves these questions and to see if you're actually approaching it in a rights respecting way. And then two final tools, which are the two that I'm most excited about, is what came back from the consultations was that there was that people wanted an everyday checklist, a really simple thing that's now going to be a big poster that can go into schools and clubs and hospitals. And it's a very simple set of questions in everyday settings for people to think through, you know. And I think the questions came from adults and from children and young people. So they're trying to implement, obviously, the Lundy model. And if you look at, for example, under voice, I mean, a really important question, tiny little questions, but in practice, they have like really like mega impact. How can they raise the things that matter to them? So often we go in with an adult agenda to say, well, we want to know in your context, you can tell me what it is, what's going to happen here, what do you think? But where do you create the space to say, right, what do we need to be talking about? What aren't we talking about that we need to talk about in this club or this team, or with you as an individual person playing sport? Those are the questions that we've agreed, really simple. And then on the other side, I'm sorry, I think that the heading is gone. We worked with children and young people to do a little evaluation sheet, and they came back and they said, like, if they've done a consultation with in any context, they don't want to sit and write in a whole form or questionnaire. They wanted it to be one page. And these are the questions that we agreed with children and young people that would be asked to evaluate the quality of their participation. So you can see these are the questions, again, based on the model. I've been listened to from the start, because often we're too far in for things to happen. I understood what was being discussed. I had enough time to talk. Cannot emphasize that more, enough. We often, as adults, just go too quick. Listen to me now, trying to get my talk in, and it's creating space for them to think and speak. They really value that. They know who wants to hear the opinions. They know why they want them, and they will be honest about what they can try and do. So that thing about being realistic with children, that whenever you're saying we're asking you this, but if there is no money, if there is no budget, if there is no time, it's being really honest about what you can do. And then of course, I knew where our opinions were going. What were the best things about today? What would you change? And if you go on down, there's things there about food and the accommodation. Okay, so to finish then, I just want to say, and I think Debbie made the exact same point, there is no one right way to do this. There is no one right way to do child participation. I think, the model that I have helps people think through the questions they should be asking, but it is always child, it is always context, and it is always context dependent, okay? And the decision that is being made. And those things help us determine what is appropriate, what is effective. But I think if you keep to the convention and you keep to these notions of space, voice, audience, and influence, it can give you a framework for thinking these things through very systematically. So thank you very much for your time. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Laura, thank you so much for another insightful presentation. Some fantastic thoughts there shared to follow up on Debbie's awesome presentation too. We're just going to head to a question from Sheila now initially before we head to the audience questions. So over to you, Sheila.
Hi, Gary. Thank you so much, Debbie and Laura. That was absolutely fantastic. And my first question, of course, is not a question, but when we came online initially, Debbie, Gary, Sergio, Laura, and I admitted to Laura that I was a massive fan, particularly of the model. And then I identified this toolkit, which she has never seen. So it's not a question so much as just to identify that your model is so good that it's taken wings, and I'm sorry that you weren't aware of this before we started, but what I can do is I'm going to send it to you first, and then maybe we can share it with all the participants, because basically it looks at how do we engage children in decision making specifically related to sport, and it's designed by the Sport Ireland Ethics Unit, and so we'll make sure that we get it to you first, and then we'll send it to all the participants. And I do have a quick question for Debbie, and it's Aileen Howland's question. So Aileen, I'm sorry I'm asking your question, but it was looking at the two videos in the beginning of the under 8s and then the under 15s making decisions for themselves about how they play. And Aileen's question struck me as really, really poignant. It's do they do leadership skills? Is that incorporated into the work you do with them to help the young people have the confidence to express themselves?
Thanks very much for that question. It's a great one. I think the way that we approach things, is very similar to Laura's model, actually. So we're looking at creating that space in which all the children that play at the club feel really comfortable and safe in expressing their views. And as Laura rightly pointed out, some children don't want to do that in a group, and our coaches hopefully are quite attuned to that. So rather than wanting to build leaders within that group, we're looking to create safe spaces for the children to be able to share. And what we do when they're sharing with us, based on what Laura says as well, without knowing her model at the time, we always say really openly to them and explicitly, what you say matters, what you say is important to us, and what you say might result in us changing things. But within their own groups, it's about creating those spaces where children feel comfortable, I think. But with the older children, we do go on to look at them leading and helping the younger children as a kind of model throughout the club. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much. And Gary, I think I have to pass back over to you now from a time perspective.
Yeah, we're going to jump into some audience questions straight away. And I'm just going to jump first of all to Owen's question. And Owen has asked, what have been the biggest challenges faced when incorporating more play within the club? I think that question's for Debbie initially.
This is a great question, Owen, because it's one which many people raise, and many people struggle with the challenges of creating more opportunities for children to play in a kind of child-led way, and we've had, you know, ups and downs and peaks and troughs. We're 5 years old now, and we've had times where people have left because they didn't like the fact that children were controlling their own play, or they've turned up to sessions and they thought it was ridiculous that the children were just playing and that there should be an adult in charge and telling them what to do. What we've found is that if we're really, again, explicit with people about why we do what we do, so we've got lots of documents, we've got lots of presentations that we do with inviting parents along to coaching workshops. We've got lots of stuff on our website, and actually every single person that comes into contact with the club now as a new possible attendee, I send them back information saying, are you sure we're right for you, because this is the way we do things, and children have got a big voice in our club. Sometimes you don't hear from them again, but it's wonderful when people come back and say, yes, we know, and that's why we're coming to you. So being really clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it really helps.
I guess that links really nicely, Debbie, onto a question for Laura, really. And that is, in terms of when we talk about space and of influence from your model, what are the key things that parents and coaches should start to consider to ensure that children's views are taken seriously?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, because as I said, it is the holy grail of the whole thing. And if children don't see it, they'll start to get disengaged from it and think that you're just doing it for show, and they won't be as motivated. So they're going to want to see results. I think you need to look at what we would call the duty bearers differently. I think that what the coach's role is very different from the parents' role. And then I think the coaches and the parents have a role together. And I think ultimately, to me, it's about human rights, or about dignity, equality, and respect for the worth of the human person. But implementing human rights is about transparency and accountability. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about a sports level or you're talking the UN. It's transparency and accountability. Transparency means you're really open. So I love when Debbie was showing, the things that go up and the infographics created by the children, having your policies, telling those prospective parents, you sure we're for you, Transparency is one thing. Accountability is about the feedback. And that's the bit of the talk that I kind of rushed over. And this is the bit where I feel really strongly at the minute. And this is the new model, which is actually in the Irish framework now as well. This idea of how we feedback on a continuous loop. And if I can just take a second to explain that now that I have a bit more time, is it needs to be done quickly, because children aren't going to wait till next year, They could have moved on, moved to, moved club, and their lives move on really quickly because they're young and developing. Full is crucial. I have a kind of audit list of questions, and I think if you ask children their views on anything and they take the time to give them to you, I think when you respond to them, this is the critical juncture. When you, as the adult with the power in the relationship, because you do, because it can't all be child-led, because ultimately somebody's giving them that space, and ultimately someone is in a position of power that's not the child, that you're saying to them, and the questions are things like, what could you not do? Why could you not do it? How could we change that? What did you agree with? What surprised you that we said? Why did that surprise you? So what you're doing is, participation is ultimately meaningful dialogue and engagement, and those kinds of questions help you have that. So if you've got them in your head and you respond to the children this way, they will start to realize that you do take them seriously. And again, that keeps that relationship going. So transparency and accountability, and making sure you think through how you do those two things, I think are crucial in any participation context.
Thanks, Laura. And obviously, I mean, Sheila touched upon this. Your model has gained a lot of traction, is so popular that you're really easily losing track of how many people are actually using it and celebrating its purpose. So I guess it moves nicely onto another question from Owen, who's asked, from conceptualization to implementation, how long did the process take for your model to come to life?
So I suppose I'm an academic and a researcher. So the research study was a year, and I started to get uncomfortable about voice of the child in that year. And then as an academic, I have the luxury of taking time to think and speak at conferences. And I had about another year where I started to problematize voice. And I thought, voice is not enough. The title of the article, we need more to this, and particularly around the notion of where's it going, who's doing what with it, what became audience and influence. But it's still being implemented. You know, I mean, I do have to kind of keep track of where it's going because the university makes me, and people get in touch all the time. So, I mean, even just when I came back from holiday there in the past 4 weeks, I have a million emails asking about it in every context known to childhood, you know, from art to child protection to all over the world to child soldiers. I see it as like a paint by numbers. People color themselves into it. I cannot tell you the way Debbie told you how to do this. I have lots of feelings listening to it as a parent about how I wish my children had been to coaching that looked like that, you know, a lot of strong feelings as a parent. But you have to paint yourself in. And I think it'd be different for football coaching to swim coaching to gymnastics. I think people have to see what they do and how it would work in their context, whether it's with individual children, small teams, large teams. And I think that's why it has been so successful, is that I'm not telling anybody how to do it. I'm giving them the legal conditions and saying, how would you make that real in your context? Paint yourself in. So it is, I mean, it is used all over the world. I have lost, and I'm so sorry I didn't have the Sports Ireland one though, because I'm usually quite good on Ireland, but I'm so excited to hear about it and to see it. So thanks, Sheila.
Thanks, Laura. I'm just going to jump over to Sergio first, who has another question.
Thanks, Gary, and again, Laura and Debbie, fantastic presentations. Really, I think, Debbie, this is the third time I've heard you present in the last 2 weeks, and I'm still taking new things from everything you say. So that's brilliant. It's like watching a great movie 3 times and you're still getting stuff from it. So yeah, I'm going to have you on repeat. Quick question for both of you, really. In the convention, it talks about children being capable of forming a view. Okay. And how that changes as children develop, and the capability to form a view changes over time in terms of the complexity of how. But also, what's interesting really from your model, Laura, is the idea of that for children to form a view, we have to inform them and give them the information they need to be able to form a view. So if we just talk about the idea of being capable, the capability to form a view, and how that changes over time, and what it means for a coach, for example. And then the idea of informing kids so they make informed views, that'd be great.
I can start
a question for a PhD,
the theory, and then Debbie can show how she does it in practice, because I could see her doing it. We have another model. It's basically, you could have written this with Sarah, because it's actually about informed views, information, informed views to form a formed and informed view. And you coaches can slot yourselves into that. And your starting point was exactly right. It's about information. It's about, so sometimes people say to us, well, I went into a room and I said to those children, what do you want? And they had nothing to say. Well, I have never had children have nothing to say to me, because I'm not going to go in and just go, what do you want? I might go in and say, here's this is what we're thinking of in a consultation. Here's what some other people think. Here's some thoughts. Is there anything else that you think you'd need to know? So you're creating the conditions where they have enough information to come to, is exactly as you put it, a formed and informed view. And Debbie mentioned the evolving capacities principle earlier. Now that's not in Article 12 at all. It's in Article 5, but you have to read them together. Article 5 of the Convention is the right and the duty of adults and others in the child's life to advise and guide in accordance with the child's evolving capacities. So basically that's so knowing actually, when children need a lot of support and when you can just back off and children can make decisions themselves. And it's not just age related, it's decision related. So there may be a decision that 4-year-olds can make completely for themselves without you. And there may be, as Debbie was showing, her under 16s running the club, basically, or youth led, so I think it can change over time, but don't assume only older children get to do child-led decision making. But I think I'll pass over to Debbie now, because I know she's going to have lots of ways of showing how that works in practice.
That's a great explanation. So important to see the evolving capacities of both age and decision specific as well, because I like to see it as a continuum, really. So what's the decision you're asking the child to make, and how old are they? And for example, if you've got 5-year-olds who turn up for a club, they're quite capable of telling you whether they want to dribble around cones or have a little football match between them. So it's about having that understanding. But again, what we try to do is create that environment. It's about environment creation. If you've got open dialogue with children on a continuous basis, both in terms of the questions that you ask, the information that you provide before you ask those questions, but the feedback that you get. So for example, at the end of every session, we say really simply, did you enjoy it? thumbs up, thumbs down, if it's not so good. And we go around and we spend loads of time on this. To start with, it might take 20, 25 minutes, running over sessions, people waiting to get into the gates for the next session, but giving children time individually to talk to coaches. Now they jump up, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down. They know that's what's being asked. They'll talk to us independently. So it's just, and what works, as I say, for us will be different for different people in different contexts, but it is about what will create the space in which children will feel free to be able to express those views, and do they know what they're expressing views on? Very simply, on games, children are quite capable of telling you whether they've enjoyed the session or not. But longer, broader term things like, what do you want the sessions to look like on return from lockdown? That's going to require some more information.
That's great, thank you.
Excellent. I'm really mindful of time, so I'm going to take this moment to thank Debbie and Laura for their fantastic contributions today. Absolutely priceless having you on the iCoach Kids Shares special edition webinar with the Coaching Children's Collaborative. And also thank you for Sheila for chairing today's session, and for Sean as well for his insights earlier. Thanks to everyone in the audience for tuning in. We hope to see you in the next iCoach Kids Shares webinar, which will be on Thursday this week. So keep an eye on the iCoach Kids social media platforms for more information there. In the meantime, everybody stay safe and well, and we will catch you in the next session. Take care, everybody.